friends, it's Brittany at Ink and Papyrus and welcome back to my channel. I'm so excited you're here with me today to see this momentous occasion because yes, it's finally happening. I am making a pink Christmas junk journal. I've been wanting to do this for so long now. You're seeing a little bit of the finished product here as a sneak peek, but I'm going to take you through the full process of creating this journal. And even if you're not looking to make a specifically themed or specific colored junk journal, I hope just the process itself will inspire you and give you some ideas for decorating your own junk journal. And I can't tell you why it's taken me this long to create a pink journal. I've been obsessed with pink Christmas journals for as long as I can tell you. But, I have red and green ephemera laying around, and I thought, do I even have enough pink ephemera to create a journal? Well, in an upcoming video, I think we are going to dedicate the craft session to creating some adorable pink ephemera. Again, hopefully this will give you some great ideas for festive ephemera you can create yourself, even if you're not looking to make a pink journal like me. So as you can probably tell, I'm kind of just stalling on the construction of my journal. I'm just ripping out some sparkly pages and thinking about how I may layer them onto my cover. And I'm also looking through some digital images. I go through several digital images and try them on for size. I didn't want my cover to just be a single digital image. What's the fun in that? But I knew I wanted probably a tree or some outdoor landscape of some sorts to be the focal point. So you'll see me kind of trying some things on for size. If you see some digital images that you like, I will try and link everything I use below in the description box. I think I got all of these off of Etsy. And don't worry, you're going to see me use a lot of techniques to glam up this front and back journal cover that you can use yourself with or without digital images. So one of the first things you'll notice is that the construction of the journal cover itself is very simple. I end up using an old Trader Joe's pita cracker box that I had left over from Thanksgiving, and I have all the pieces that I need to make my cover. The box itself, I end up using 8.5 by 11 pages, and I have to trim them down ever so slightly, so I think the box is just a little bit smaller than that. And I'm sorry, my head is in the way. Don't worry, you won't have to look at it for too long. I take my ruler and craft knife and end up just cutting off that little extra tab. I decide to create a hidden spine journal. So basically, I'm just taking that little extra tab that's about the same size as that center portion of the box, where the front and back cover will hinge, and I'm just going to bury that inside of the journal. If you're not familiar with a hidden spine, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about shortly. So once the box is deconstructed, I put it back together, and even though I am stingy with some of my craft supplies, the Tyvek tape isn't one of them. It costs a little extra money. I think it is so worth it. I use Tyvek tape pretty much to bind all of my covers together, and the best thing is you don't have to keep going over it and over it and over it again to reinforce it. It will hold, I promise you. So I simply put a layer of Tyvek tape to bind the spine to the front cover and then flip it back over and then put another single layer of tape on the inside, and you are done. And I will simply repeat the process with the spine and the back cover. I'm going to clip this up because I don't want this video to be too much about the construction of a junk journal. I think most of you guys already know how to do that by now. If you are looking for a refresher and a complete tutorial on how to construct a junk journal, I will link a previous tutorial in the description box below. I kind of cut through this quickly because I really want to just get on to the fun part, and I'm sure you guys do too, and that's some ideas for actually decorating the cover. And we're back off to the races, but we're back to the pink paper pad. I decided that I want the tree to be the focal point because I want to bedazzle the heck out of the thing, but I still want some kind of pink background, and I didn't want to use the digital image or something busy to take away from the actual focal point itself. And I thought, well, maybe some bland pink paper will do it. And you could totally sew the pink paper to the journal cover, but I just decided to glue it. Make sure you smush that glue down. You don't want big beads of wet white glue, or else you're going to get a lot of wrinkling and bubbling. I'm sure you guys know all of this by now. And so we're almost done with layering the pink paper, which is really the boring part. As you guys know, I'm a huge fan of templates. I lined up a single piece of pink paper, made a mark where to cut, and so basically I used that template to cut all my other pieces of paper. Make sure when you lay down your paper, you want to, so in this case I am using fabric to reinforce my spine. Make sure that piece of paper is matches up perfectly with the outer end of your cover, and make sure there's no hangover onto where the tape needs to hinge freely between the spine and the cover itself. So I did decide to use this really pretty pink themed digital image for the inside of the front and back cover. It's very vintage, and even though I don't plan on having the entire journal be vintage themed, it has this really chic look. I think works really well with what I plan to be the overall theme of the journal. And just like the pink paper, I just held it up to the journal, made a mark, and cut off the excess. You want to make sure the edge of the digital image matches up perfectly with the end of your cover, and you want to make sure there is no excess or hangover onto where the tape hinges. And don't worry about any tape that may be showing up between the spine and the cover. That's all going to be covered up with fabric, and fabric, guys, is really forgiving. If the edges are not perfect, like the fabric, I think that's why I probably reinforce all of my journals with fabric over the spine. It just, I like the way it looks, and it's so much more forgiving than trying to line up paper or some other material. I end up using this really lush pink fabric that I love. I do end up decorating my spine with some really pretty pink flowers. Had I not done that, I probably would have kicked myself, because you can clearly see a little bit of the chipboard and tape underneath the fabric itself. So if your fabric is the least bit transparent, I would definitely recommend just taking the time to gesso over it, and that way you don't have any hints of anything that you don't want to see. It worked out for me in the end because I threw some flowers over top, but just an FYI. When you're working with fabric like this, and especially if you're using wet white glue, before you apply the fabric down, you really want to make sure you smush the glue around with your finger, or else I promise you, you're going to get bleed through. Now, this is part of the journal construction where you may want to sew instead of gluing it down uh, with wet glue. Now, if you do glue your fabric down, you probably want to secure it with some either bulldog clips, or you may want to put a little bit of glue stick down first. I have mucked up my sewing machine and gotten, this is where you really don't want your stitches that are skipped or nesting or anything nasty. Like you really, this is where I do get very like anal retentive about my sewing, because you really only get one shot, or else you kind of wreck your cover. I mean, there are ways to salvage it: put more fabric over top, put trim over it, things like that. We've all done it, but you really want to be precise about this. So if you put down glue stick, and then put your fabric over top, let it dry first before you attempt to sew. Same with if you do end up gluing this fabric down with wet glue and decide you want to sew over top. This is the time. I know many of us are not patient, but this is where you really want to have some patience and let it sit and let it dry, because believe me, it is trying to sew through adhesive tape and wet glue on top is a kind of a recipe for disaster. Ask me how I know. And it's okay to move your fabric around a little bit, add some finishing touches. When I wrap the fabric around, sometimes I'll have to make some little adjustments. If your fabric, if the edges aren't what you want them to be, it's okay. You can add trim to it, which I believe I do here. You can always sew the trim on or glue it if you want that crisp look in between your fabric of your spine and the cover itself. A lot of times once I wrap the fabric around, I will end up going back underneath the fabric with glue, and this time I will apply wet glue to the edges directly underneath the fabric, and the bleed through tends not to be so bad, probably just because it's just the little edge. You still want to smush it down really good, but don't be afraid to do that because you don't want your fabric lifting off the cover, and you want to make sure it's secure, especially since those are the edges where you're going to be hinging the cover open, and that fabric is more likely to move. So first I thought I was going to use this digital image of this gorgeous tree, and I think this would have been a great choice had it not been just too big for the cover. I decided to use a smaller tree instead, and the point being was the tree just needed to be big enough to decorate and add some bling to. I think some of my favorite journal covers involve just layers of things. And even though I've made some very simple covers in the past, when it comes to Christmas, I like them to be very festive and bright and bold and really detailed. So even though the construction of the journal was easy, I really want to go all out on this cover. So at this point, I've definitely committed to blinging out my tree. I definitely want it layered, and I end up picking some you can hardly see it, but it gives it texture. It's some just white, kind of like lacy material. It's really cheap. I think I got it on Amazon, and I want that backed by a glitter, bright, like look at me piece of cardstock. And you'll see me just playing around with trim. The fabric didn't really rip kind of quite like I would like, and there was some user error in there too, measuring or making sure that it was, I ripped it down equally on both sides. I really didn't. It was kind of off, and so to detract from that, I found this really pretty pink and gold trim. I think it's going to add a lot and tie the cover and the spine together really nicely. So as you can see, I kind of went back and forth about what to do with the back cover of the journal. I was looking at a stocking and a snowman, but if I'm really going to bling the image out like I'm going to do with the tree, I thought the easiest way to do that would be to just hang a decoration from some tinsel. So I ended up folding the ornament on top of itself and kind of just cutting out a little hole, and I'm going to string the ornament with some tinsel at the top of the journal. Before I do that though, I decided to get this trim squared away. It was the unevenness of the fabric on the spine was bothering me. So I take that beautiful looking trim and I just run it through my sewing machine a couple of times. The trim is thick, so I end up having to sew one side and then sew the other so it's not like coming off. But I end up really liking how this looks. Just be sure that if you're only sewing on one side, just make sure you know where your sutures or your sorry, you can tell I'm in medicine. Make sure you know where your stitches are on the other side. My stitches did come through to the inside cover, and I didn't really like the way they looked, so I covered them up really, I thought, cleverly, and I will show you that in just a few minutes. When it comes to layering and decorating your cover, I love sewing. Not only is it a great way to bind all of the paper and fabric, especially if you're layering like I am, but there's something so pretty and elegant about it, and that is totally the vibe I'm going for with this Christmas cover. So before we start decorating the tree, I decide to sew the tree and the glitter cardstock and the fabric all together, and then we will glue it down on the cover as a single unit. Now to the moment we've all been waiting for, time to decorate that tree. So first I open my Brad's drawer here. I end up grabbing a couple of book covers because I just think the journals look a little bit more polished with the middle ends. But I also grabbed some snowflake brads, and initially I thought, well, maybe I'll utilize these and incorporate these into the tree itself. But then I found this really, really pretty sparkly brad and thought, wow, this would be the perfect tree topper. And after I added the sparkly tree topper, I went a little bit of a different route, but you could totally continue to decorate the rest of your tree with these brads. I end up going the route of glitter, which I have all this glitter laying around. I don't utilize it nearly enough. Some of the other ways you could decorate a tree is if you have old broken jewelry, think about using those gemstones to add them as bling onto the tree. Like, how cool would that be? Just some ideas. So, if you're like me and you want to put some bling or glue onto your tree, you want to create some really thick beads of glue. You don't want there to be any interruptions in the glue. So, I kind of come along the glue and create some nice diagonal lines, and this is where we're going to pour the glitter onto. Like I said, don't be shy with that glue. And even I actually go over each of the lines of glue multiple times just to make sure there aren't any interruptions in them. You'll see in a second, there's no kind of mess free way to get that chunky glue on. First, I kind of started to sprinkle it, and then I was like, oh, what the heck, and just started pouring it onto the tree. Don't worry, there's an easy way to get the glue back in the all the excess not glue glitter back into the glitter bottle, and we're gonna shake it off and put it into a piece of paper when we're done and pour it right back into the glitter vial. So don't worry about that, just be generous and make sure all of your glue is covered. I was a little worried at first that maybe the glitter wouldn't stick to the glue and it would come off, but I checked it a couple hours later after it was fully dried and it really stuck on really, really nicely. And again, that's why you want a really thick bead. You also want to give it some dimension. So a great way to do that is to get a really, really thick line of glue going and then put some chunky glitter over top. So don't worry about smushing it down with your finger. Don't worry about spreading the glue around. No, leave it thick and chunky. All right, after we're done, we're going to put away our excess glitter. And I do end up going over this image and actually a lot of the cover with this matte sealant. It's just the usual kind of sealant that you would get that you may use in some of your other projects. And I can link that below and in the description box. I will warn you, it stinks to high heaven. So if you're doing this project, even though it is kind of cold out, I would recommend doing it outside or somewhere where you have a lot of ventilation. I don't know if I remember doing that on camera or not. I just gave it a good spritz around the entire tree. But honestly, I don't even know that it was necessary. I think if you use a big heaping amount of glue, your glitter is going to stick just fine. And like I warned you in the beginning of this video, I wanted this cover to be extravagant. I wanted it to be pink and fabulous and blingy. So just putting on glitter, glitter strands definitely wasn't enough. I used some pearl stick-ons, any like bling. I think I added some bling stick-ons as well, just as I do when I decorate the ornament. Just in general, my rule for covers is just keep layering and keep adding until you are happy with it. And that's what I did with this tree. I just kind of went along again in a diagonal pattern, adding more pearl stick-ons, bling stick-ons, and I think you'll see me hold up the tree when I'm finally finished with this process. It's I don't think the camera does it justice. It's so more like luminescent up in person. And as you'll see, I found the easiest way to apply these stick-ons are with tweezers. I was really struggling at first. I was using the narrow nose of the tweezers. Get yourself some wide nose tweezers. That is the way to go, or else it's so frustrating trying to peel these on and stick them on by hand. So, when you're layering and attaching things to your journal, think about the best way to do so. Sometimes we use wet white glue, silicone glue, glue sticks, sometimes we sew it on. I was having a lot of trouble with those pieces of snowflake confetti there that you see up at the top. Um, in general, I don't like gluing pieces like down with especially wet white glue. It seems to seep out, and I don't think that it sticks to the glitter cardstock very well. So I tried sewing them down, and it just perforated the snowflakes, and they were kind of like edging up, like the edges were coming up, and it looked really terrible. So I ended up just pulling out my hot glue gun, and it worked like a charm. I always forget about hot glue, and this is why hot glue guns at one point were all the rage, and in my world, they're still all the rage. And hot glue is also how I secure the tinsel to the back cover that ornament is hanging from. I love hot glue. Let's face it, some things that we put on our journals, especially if we want them to get longevity, just don't stick well with regular glue. And even though these things can be sewed and look really nice sewn to the journal, who wants stitches hanging out on the other side? Most of us don't, right? Especially if we're not just sewing around the journal, they end up just being random stitches here and there. I really don't like that look. So hot glue is where it's at. And I found that since I've gotten this cordless hot glue gun, I don't have to finagle with a cord, especially when you're moving about your craft room. I tend to use it more and more. That's exactly what I end up doing with these flowers, these cute little flowers I had hanging around. And I think, by the way, the silver and the pink just ties the theme of the journal so well. This is how I also covered up my boo-boo. Remember how I told you I did not gesso that spine like I should have, and you could see pieces of wording from the pita box as well as the Tyvek tape hanging showing through the fabric. That's how I fixed this, just hot gluing these adorable flowers to the spine. And even though I was planning on decorating that ornament, it still felt like there was a lot of blank space around the back cover. And so I decided to put some of those snowflakes that you see there above the tinsel. And I, of course, hot glued them. Even though the snowflakes apparently have some adhesive on the back of them, they still don't stick for crap. It is kind of hard hot gluing small little items like this, so be careful you don't burn your fingers off. But aside from that, it worked well. I did have a little bit of seepage of the hot glue onto the cover, but I just went around the snowflakes with my tweezers and cleaned it up while it was still wet, and you really couldn't even see anything after I was done. I can't help but get excited at how this cover is coming together so nicely. This may be a little bit of bling vomit for some of you, but for me, I don't really ever seem to know when to stop. And like I said, it's a Christmas journal. I want it to be just really stand out, really shiny, really sparkly. So I am on track to accomplish that, I would say. Next, I add my middle corners. Even though these are optional, I just think they give the journal a more polished, finished look. And especially if you're using thinner chipboard like me, the cover has a tendency to bend over time, so it really just keeps the corners looking nice and sharp. So just like I decorated the tree, I go ahead and I find some really cute pink and white bling that I'm going to use to decorate the ornament. Now this bling is so small, there's no way I'm going to be able to apply these with hot glue. So I just go ahead and I take my wet white glue, make big blobs, big beads, I guess you'd say, where I plan to place my bling, and then take my tweezers and apply the bling right on top of the wet white glue. A little bit will seep out. Don't worry, be generous with the glue so that it sticks. The glue surrounding it will dry clear. Just don't muck around with it, or else you're going to get glue on your bead, and or your bling rather, and then it's not going to be so blingy. So I knew I wanted a phrase or some kind of Christmas verbiage. So what would be more appropriate than Merry Christmas? So I go ahead and just ink it up with my Tim Holtz Distress Oxide. This is my Kitsch Flamingo. How perfect, right? Ink that I'm using. I glue it on, and then it's time to turn my attention to the back cover and kind of put on the finishing touches. So I found some words for the back cover too. I don't know if you can see, but it says under the mistletoe. But I didn't think the words would stand out by themselves, so I backed them with another digital image of some poinsettia and also backed it with some really gold tissue paper that I had left over. Like I said, I will put the links to some of the digital images I used in the description box below. The verbiage that I used and these poinsettias are part of my Graphics Fairy digital image collection. Instead of buying the digital image, you're buying a subscription. It is, I believe, $9.99 a month for unlimited usage to their entire collection. They have thousands of images and different themed printable bundles. I don't get a commission or any kind of kickbacks or anything like that. I'm just telling you about the site because I do find it very helpful, especially if you're looking for something very specific. And they put out new themed bundles every week, which I think is really exciting. So check them out. Give them a look if you would. I've never regretted their subscription. I use their image from their image library all the time, so it's definitely worth it for me. Anyways, just finishing up here, and just in case this cover wasn't enough bling for you, I put some additional pearl stick-ons around the words under the mistletoe to really make them stand out. Not to worry, we're almost done, and for those of you that have stuck with me this far, thanks for hanging with me through what appears to be the ultimate marathon cover making. This is probably one of the most detailed and I don't know, just intricate covers I think I have ever made. But again, I thought it was appropriate given that it's Christmas. Everything has to be bolder and brighter and more sparkly in my world. Off camera, I sewed that pink fluffy applique to the front and the back cover just to create a closure. And then after that, you'll see I go ahead and work on finishing up the actual hidden spine portion itself. Obviously, it's not completely hidden. You still have to do a little something to the pieces that are going to peer through after you bind your signatures in. And for the spine, I kept it really simple. I simply collaged some pieces of pink cardstock and digital images that I had left over as scraps. As you can see, the hidden portion of the spine that I just decorated, is just ever so slightly smaller than the actual size of the bound book, and that ensures that once it's inserted, the front and the back cover can still hinge and move about freely. Once I bind my signature pages into that removable portion, I am going to coat the very back, the undecorated portion that says pita chips on it. I'm going to coat it in glue, generously coat it in glue, and then stick it into the middle spine, cover it, and then I'm going to clip it. I think this is the best way to make sure it dries flush with the book itself. Once you have coated your spine with glue and lay it down to the portion of the fabric in the middle of your bound book, take a really big jumbo size paper clip and then clip it on the top and the bottom until it dries. And remember how I told you guys there's always a creative way to hide something if you don't like it? Well, when I stitched down my closure, it left some stitches on the inside that seemed jagged and uneven. So I went ahead on the inside of the cover and glued down some really pretty pieces of pink ribbon over top, and then added some of those beautiful blue little blingy things, so the inside of the cover got some love and decoration and bling as well, and all is right with the world. And now for the absolute finishing touches, I take my Crocodile Big Bite and punch a hole in the top of the spine where I plan to add a tassel. I just couldn't help myself. Some of you are probably looking at spine full of flowers and are thinking, what, you're adding more? Yes, I'm adding more. Whether or not the journal needs it, I don't know. But there's something about Christmas where I need some jingle bells and some cute little charms, or else to me, it's not complete. So I got some pink applique and ribbon, and I found this. I think I got it off AliExpress. Um, it's this almost looks like jewelry. It's got like some crystals in it, and it's really delicate. You can actually cut through it if you cut exactly in the right place. And I thought this was a gorgeous addition to the tassel. After I tied off the tassel, I added some beads, charms, jingle bells, you name it, I added it, and this journal is complete. So, guys, thanks so much for coming along with me on this truly what was a journey and a marathon of a journal cover making session. I hope this inspired you to make a Christmas journal of your own. Whether or not it's pink, it's all up to you. If you found value in this, please hit that like and subscribe button, and I can't wait to see you the next time.